again. This is now Furnal Equinox 2024. We're back again, better than ever. Now shave, look at that. Early shave in the morning means less fur. I, for one, again, welcome our internet overlord. YouTube, TikTok that will be banned soon, and all other sort of social media. Hi! So nice to see you again.
Hey, thank you.
But we have lots of art sites. Furry Den, Tiger Den, VCL, Orlando, Yerf. There are also sites that weren't strictly furry, but were furry friendly, like Side 7, Elfwood. But again, there was this nervousness because corporate interests were not sure how they liked the internet, and they were a bit nervous about fan art, because if someone else draws, your trademark character, is that threatening your trademark? So these sites were like, well, if lawyers come after us, we can't afford lawyers' fees. So some sites would say, okay, please do not post any Sonic art. Nothing has happened so far, but we're a little bit nervous. We don't want to get prosecuted. That relaxed as the decades went on, but at the time it was a little bit nervous. Like I said, this is when the comics distribution structure collapsed, and all we had were Diamond. I guess the main survivors from those were Gold Digger, Genus, and Furlough. BBSs and fanzines were now mostly dead. They were little hangers on. Is Terry still here? No? Fineclaw and Steel? Anyway, that was the local. Yes! Fineclaw and Steel, Werewolf Zine. Oh, much beloved. You were a late runner. Thank you for keeping that thread alive. And the web was really taking off. Now more people had cell phones. Cameras weren't necessarily integrated into them yet, but now a lot of people had digital cameras. Google came along and made it much easier to find stuff. And now it was getting easier to have a social life with furries local to you. Again, not so much message boards, but through mailing lists. And the fandom was getting big enough that now we start talking about drama. So, furry has a lot of different interests, and in the past we used to think of it more as like it's like media. It's like you like cartoons, you like music, and this role-playing games, movies, books, that sort of thing. But there was a growing number of people who were like, this doesn't really fit how I feel about furry. And this is actually a similar split happened, not really a split, it's just sort of a broadening of the understanding of the spectrum, if that makes sense. In science fiction fandom, like in the 1960s, you can think of fandom as like, some people like, fandom is just a goddamn hobby. Other people are like, no, it's my way of life. Or anything in between, or something not on that spectrum at all. And this is when, so late 1990s is when this kind of hit furry fandom. And a group of like, furry fandom isn't something, sure the comics and stuff is fine, but it's more like this is how we feel and how we interact. And they started a rival news group called Alt Lifestyle Furry. Lifestyle was not the most neutral term at the time. That would have been a term used by sort of nervous liberals in the American sense that were like trying to, understanding that gay pride was making a lot of progress in the 1990s if you lived in a major city. But people were like trying to sort of reconcile with this. So they would have been like, oh, do you know Bill and John? Yeah, they're alternative lifestyle people, if you know what I mean. That only lasted for like 2 or 3 years, and then it was used by people who wanted to get into veganism and live off the grid, and then it lost all meaning altogether. But there was a light implication, and so when they chose the word lifestyle, the small number of homophobes in the fandom was like, oh, you just want to talk about gay stuff, do you? And it's like, no, it was a lot more than that. And the people who started the news group were very, very open-minded, very good, and they wrote sort of a charter, and they did it in a very smart way, because they didn't want any more of the drama and the fights. So what they said is, well, what is furry lifestyle? We can't tell you. It's part of the philosophy of alt lifestyle furry that a person's furry lifestyle is whatever the person concerned asserts that it is. And this is where we get to the modern version of furry fandom, where furry is whatever it means to you personally. That's how it kind of started. And they also said like no one's sort of personal definition is any better than anyone else's. And this just got rid of all of the fights. The problem is, if you also were interested in furry media, the comics and books and stuff, if you tried to post that on Alt Lifestyle, they say, get out of here, go to Alt Fan Furry. And if you were on Alt Fan Furry, it's like you want to talk, well, this is, I have this sort of spiritual feeling with my, with Furry Fandom. They're like, get out of here, go to Alt Lifestyle Furry. So there was a schism. It wore off, it just took some time. But at the beginning, people could be kind of touchy about it.
No cross-posting.
Yeah, no cross-posting. I have that in my notes. Around 1997, conference, sorry, because I live in Ottawa, conference reached 1,000 people. And people were beginning to get a little bit worried about maybe people were beginning to party a little bit too hard, or people were trying to be a little bit too open about themselves in hotel space. My last conference was CF7. I forget the year. And I stopped going, mainly because I was just an introvert and I didn't really know people. It was very expensive to fly out there. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the furry stuff. I got prints and stuff. But on a small level, I was also seeing all these people show up. Like, you go every year. You know the faces. You may not know who they are, but you're like, oh, I recognize that person. I recognize it. Oh, it feels good to be back with the crowd again. But now there are people showing up at night. And they were kind of creepy. And they definitely weren't there during the day. And I was like, I'm getting mildly uncomfortable here. But even some people, they wanted to go for the party. They wanted that, because that's what the version of the fandom meant to them. And there was an undercurrent of disagreement, but we didn't really want to talk about it too much. But it was there. So I didn't go to CF8. The next year, CF8 happened, and that's when people started sort of complaining out loud about little developments. There was a furry from Toronto named Silver, very, very gay, wonderful, wonderful guy, amazing. Also, a little bit of an exhibitionist. And he decided he was going to the dance, and so he went from his hotel room to the dance, wearing bunny ears, a little tail, full body paint, and a thong. And that was a very controversial decision back then. Now I don't think people would care less. They'll say, like, at this event they'll be like, that's fine, can you do it after, 9:30 p.m.? But back then, people were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And some people were like, no, that's, yeah, go Silver. And other people were like, eh. So we were growing, we were changing as a fandom, and that was sort of the cusp. Remember I mentioned auctions that we were doing for things? At the time, we had what were called pet or slave auctions, where someone would say, I will offer, a massage, or I'll carry your stuff around with you, for the day, for that. But some of them were like couched in this very, I'll give you a massage, And, some of the haters in the fandom were like, it would be a real shame if someone called the police and said there was, prostitution going on here. And some of these assholes might have actually followed through on it. So most of the conventions just quietly dropped that fundraising model, and that's how we got just the regular charity fundraising that we now see in all furry conventions today. And the interesting thing about the late 90s is that, along with all the gay pride, it was still difficult coming out of the closet. You had more of a support network. It was amazing and wonderful to watch the growth of the LGBT community, and seeing them finally stand up and get more civil rights and fight back against police brutality and all that kind of shit. But what if you were not just LGBT? What if you were a nerd? It was still really difficult to be a nerd. Now along comes Furry Fandom. We've just shifted to this new philosophy of making it an open concept. So now furry can represent to you your identity. So we got a lot of gay furry, LGBT furries showing up. I mean, if you were a gay nerd, you weren't guaranteed to become a furry, not at all. But we got a sizable chunk, and that population in Furry Fandom has just maintained itself ever since then. But that is when it started. Because even in popular culture, there wasn't, even in nerd fandom, science fiction always very open to concepts of gender identity, but there wasn't much material out there. I mean, there was the Tiptree Awards for sexuality in science fiction. And like, on TV there was like Xena Warrior Princess, that kind of had kind of like a lesbian hoye thing going on, but you know, so it was difficult to find media that really resonated with you as a person. And then we reached 1988. Okay, okay, not the old people. For the younger people, how many of you have heard of the burned furs?
What?
The burned furs.
Oh.
Yeah, not all that many, and there's a reason for that. So these were a group of primarily artists who were concerned that furries' reputation was going to impact their ability to be hired for artistic work. And they wrote a mission statement, already a bad sign. I will quote part of it. Anthropomorphic's fandom is being overrun by sexually dysfunctional, socially stunted, and creatively bankrupt hacks and pervs.
I don't want to join now.
Yeah, but what they did do is they broke the ice. There's like, because there were concerns about behavior, like I said, like at the convention. And people were like, they were being very kind of elitist snobs with what they thought furry fandom was and what it could be. But we didn't really have a concept of what it was. And finally people said, okay, all right, can we please talk about this? I mean, I think these guys are kind of assholes, but also on the small area of behavior, maybe they kind of have a point. Can we talk about this a little bit? And this started a 3-year flame war. Like 1998 through 2001, 3 solid years. Now this was mainly confined to just like the Usenet news groups. There were lots of people in the fandom who were not involved with this at all and honestly did not care. But the fandom was small enough that the degree of separation kicked in. So like even if you didn't want any part in this stupid argument, you probably knew someone who did. And imagine being a friend caught between people at sort of polar opposites of the attitude, because we were like, well, you know, should behavior be a thing? You know, what's the role of adult material in the fandom? I also should point out the burned furs were definitely, like, if we look at furry fandom, we're definitely not all on the same page. Not at all, and that's fine, we get along. If you look at the burned furs, they were definitely not all on the same page. Like some people I just want a little bit more better behavior, all the way to I'm a homophobe and I hate gays. It had the whole range, but they were definitely not all on the same page with each other. How many of you have seen like the documentary, the Fandom documentary that Eric Risher and Ashley did? Anyone seen that? Really amazing documentary. That documentary suggests that the burned furs are the cause of the alt-right furries. No. Absolutely not. The alt-right furries claim to be burned furs just because they just wanted asshole cred. But they had actually nothing to do, because, you know, Foxler, he would have had to have been 10, you know? So, no, he was not part of that. So people had valid gripes, but how do you discuss this kind of thing? And after 3 years of flame wars, all we could find out is that we just all disagreed with each other. And we were tired, and we were trying to sort of make the fandom feel better. So we kept on saying, okay, the fandom is very open and accepting. That is the phrase you would have heard in the late 90s over and over again. That was sort of the fandom's mantra. So finally, the burn furs kind of lost, and they all just kind of scattered in different directions. And the sort of lifestyle end won. And there was this period in the early 2000s, this whole period was so negative. Now, no one wanted to talk about the fandom, because we would just get into fights. And actually discussing the fandom in the fandom became taboo, which is really weird. And people would just use that against you. Like, I'm talking like 15 years after the burn furs, was like, you know, I was at this event and there was someone behaving kind of badly, and like, can we talk about this? People would go, yo, you know, you sound like a burned fur. You're trying to destroy the fandom, aren't you? And you're like, what? No, look, can't we just, screw you, you know? It was like, it was really kind of nasty period.
I got hit with that a couple of times.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And so some people said, well, we kicked those people out. That means I can behave however I like. And other people are like, no, hang on. And so little elements of this remain. And some people are like, hey, everyone's against this particular paraphilia. Now is my chance to be open about it. And we're like, whoa, no. Like, hello. Maybe not such a good idea. But we definitely did not agree with each other on this thing. Sorry, I'm just sort of reading my notes because this section is kind of all over the place. Yeah, like I said, social attitudes were changing in the fandom. There was a lot more gay pride. The web was immensely liberating. Like, we didn't have this feeling of being tracked and customer profiles. It really felt like this is a place you could express yourself without worry. Like, no one was going to dox you or anything. That just wasn't a thing back then. The economics of the fan was growing. You know how like in fandom, some people can be kind of hefty. So also the joke, sort of the late 1990s, furry fandom was like, well, by and large, furries are bi and large. That was our joke. We came up with that. And as people had more mobile phones, like the distinction between fandom life and real life was blurring. Conference East, the convention out there, it died. The person in charge of it didn't, she liked running it, but she also liked to kind of run everything, even though she had heads of different departments. She was kind of trying to control everything. So a couple of the staff just said, okay, we're leaving, and they started their own convention called Anthrocon, which was initially up in Albany, New York. Same weekend, Independence Day weekend, but that's where it was for a couple of years. Uncle Kaigi was not running it yet, but it was hanging out in the lounge of Albany Anthrocon where he started his storytelling, and that's how that sort of tradition started in there. And as the fandom was growing, we realized we had to start taking things a little bit more seriously. We had to start carding people more at conventions. Adult artwork in the dealer's room, whatever, they had to be more careful with that. So Anthrocon, it moved from Ohio up in New York. New York State had different rules. They're like, okay, we don't want to get in trouble. We're going to put age indicators on people's badges. You're going to have to cover, portions of your, in those page protectors, you're going to have to cover adult portions of the art if you're selling that. That was so much of a shock and new. People were saying, oh no, how dare you, let's boycott Anthrocon. I mean, that was controversial. Like now, it's like, so what, we're used to doing it. But back then, people were, not everyone, but some people were very upset. Let's see, a couple of sort of ex-furry artists did a very depreciating comic called Skunk. Please don't look it up. By 1998, we now had 6 conventions, including our first con across North America. That's also about the time where Camp Feral here in Canada started. Remember we had the Usenet news groups? The news groups were kind of dying off because of spam. Usenet is where the word spam was invented for that kind of thing. Someone started a new set of news groups called FurryNet. And there was also all these random just things just popping up in furry fandom. Furcadia showed up in the late 1990s. We found out there was a parallel fandom that had evolved independently in Japan called Kimono. The problem is most of them didn't speak English and most of us didn't speak Japanese. But a couple of them found out about conference, came over, didn't speak a word of English, went home, drew a manga about it. And like you could look at the manga, it's like, holy shit. That's trending. It's got like the hat and the coat and like the wolf flesh on his shoulder. And, like he's in this manga in Japan. It's like it was really great to look at. We started having fursuit parades and dances because the rave scene was now a big thing. A guy named Steve Plunkett showed up with like puppets, and this is how puppetry showed up in the fandom. Unusually late, because all of us had grown up watching The Muppet Show. But I guess it was so good, none of us could never could say, hey, maybe we could do that. It just hadn't occurred to us. Conference eventually died out. They passed it to a new con chair who tried running it. He was not very good at running it. He tried. He honestly tried. He got a lot of shit. Some of it justified, some of it not. And the con that rose to replace that was Further Confusion. And Further Confusion said, we're going to have our first full fursuit track. So you began seeing that. Even at Conference East 2, I remember there was like one panel devoted to fursuits, and that room was full. I mean, people were just so interested that you could really feel fursuiting really wanting to take off at that time. How are we doing here? A little bit behind. But, more waves, like I said, the Gargoyles, Lion King. For years, there was all this artwork with like baggy raver pants. Oh God, I thought that artwork would never end. And now we're getting into the 2000s, and it's really difficult to describe. Like if you took Furry Fandom 1990 and you look at Furry 2000, the changes from year to year felt very gradual, not really noticeable. But if you look at that 10-year difference, the fandom is massively different. Just now the pace of it has changed. Like now you can interact furry all week. Just all the technology, the number of conventions, the number of people, the things that you find in the fandom, just drastically different. And at the end of the 1990s, you begin to see the phrase, "Oh, this is my personal furry." And then a couple of years, somewhere around 2001-ish, someone comes up with the term fursona. I don't know where it came from, but that's where the concept of fursona finally cements itself. The burn furs thing has now died out, and like I said, we didn't want to discuss politics in the fandom anymore, which I think was kind of bad for the fandom. But also there was this but people wanted to, after the 3 years of negativity, we want a more positive feeling in the fandom. There's a group called Furry Peace, and they said that we want inclusion, we want tolerance, responsibility, to think about what effect your actions will have on other people. Maybe not everyone did that, but all the new furry conventions popping up. We're like, okay, let's run these more responsibly, more open-mindedly, but also at the same time, because they were like, sort of, yeah, I can do whatever I like. It's like, okay, we might have to start banning people. But they took a very sort of more polite attitude towards allowing people to have fun in furry fandom while also having just controlling behavior just a little, just so that we can have fun together and keep our venues and not get in trouble. It was a much more nuanced look. Unfortunately, end of 1990s was also when the media, who loved this new internet thing. Hey, let's do quirky story of the week. Ooh, who are these furry people? And just from about like 1998 through 2009-ish, it was just media exploitation. It's like, hey, let's paint these weirdos as freaks, and get viewership and advertising.
That episode.
It was before it started. There was a magazine called Loaded. That was 1998. Vanity Fair and ER that was 2001. MTV did a special. There was kind of a nasty BBC documentary in 2002. Then there was CSI. That was 2003. That was fairly late. Unfortunately, the web also. This is when organized trolling culture began. Not 4chan, but the forerunners to 4chan. Sites like Something Awful. And if they wanted to pick fun on furries, we were like their go-to group. Just for years and years and years. It was difficult. There was a person in the fandom who had been in the fandom. He actually made some of the first fursuits, named Sean Keller. He decided to just become anti-fur, and he did a whole bunch of like flash animations, and he published a nasty comic. What else? The Portal of Evil, Crush Ship Destroy. These are all different sites. And furry fandom became very insular. Uncle Kage at Anthicon, because now he was in charge, he moved it back down to Philadelphia area. Irony, we ended up using the same hotel that PhilCon had been used, who ran out of dealer's room space. Now that was our hotel for a couple of years until it got torn down.
Yeah, I remember that year.
That was, and it was hard for us. Like I said, we became very personal, very insular, and fursuiters were beginning to show up at Comic-Cons and stuff like that. That was sort of the closest we came to any kind of outreach, but other people were like, I don't know what's going on in furry fandom. Let's see what else happened in the early 2000s. Like, Napster, sharing MP3s, peer-to-peer file sharing. piracy, that sort of thing. Well, that hit Furry Fandom too. There was a guy named Saib who would scan tons and tons of furry merch that people were still trying to sell. And like he put gigs of it on like file sharing. It's like people even have hard drives big enough to host all the stuff. Because he was like, yeah, information wants to be free. Now he was an asshole. So that was the thing that was happening in there. And now we're beginning to see furry online message boards. These were finally working so we could communicate just directly online with each other. But a lot of like the furry websites were struggling. They hadn't been maintained. They didn't have a lot of new features, to keep people there. And some of them were just going down, or the furry-friendly sites weren't hosting furry art anymore for whatever reason. And we were running out of places to put furry art. This is like 2003-ish. And so suddenly Fur Affinity was cobbled together very quickly to sort of meet this need, and just exploded because it was really the only place we had left for a while. And and then Fur Affinity has just kind of been wobbling forward ever since. By 2000, we had 9 cons. There was also a science fiction convention in Chicago called DuckCon, and there was a growing furry track there. But it was that furry track was getting bigger and bigger, and it was beginning to cause a bit of resentment amongst the science fiction fans. What protected us was that Robert King, he also started the fursuit mailing list. He was the husband of the woman who had started the convention. So we had a little bit of sort of protection, but head of security didn't like the furries there. And the furries had trouble getting event space. Like, okay, furries, you can have, the ballroom starting at midnight, And they were also having problems getting guests of honor, because they were like, science fiction, I've kind of heard this is a furry con. That kind of creeps me out a little. I'm not sure if I want to be your guest of honor. So Robert King said, okay, I can see there's this growing conflict. So we'll just separate the furry thing and make our own convention. That is how we got Midwest Fur Fest. So that was the origin there. And around this time, we were having about 1,200 people at the cons. Pop-ups, fursuits were exploding everywhere. The Megaplex convention in Florida became a very good home for that sort of thing. Like I said, Further Confusion had its own fursuiting track. Headless lounges, you were now seeing the first headless lounges. Online, we were beginning our first online furry auction sites like Furbid and Furbuy. Early 2000s, Second Life, oh my god, huge thing. YouTube was coming in. Pokemon and Digimon came in. There was still nervousness about corporate takedowns, so people would do things in the style of Pokemon and Digimon, but weren't technically, oh no, this is my Pokemorph. This is my Digimorph. Yes. We started, someone tried publishing a collection of furry short stories called Best in Show Anthology. They started the Ursa Major Awards. Actually, this is the month to vote for the Ursa Major Awards. It's basically just a celebration. It's a popular vote. You can find the Ursa Major Award website. You have to give them your email address. They're not going to spam you. It doesn't happen. But then they give you a voting key, and they have a list like, here's who was nominated for things that came out in the last year, both inside and outside of the fandom. So you have until end of March to vote on the Ursa Major Awards. Furry Fandom was now creating its own tabletop RPGs. You're now seeing Iron Claw, World Tree, and now you had like sites selling like full furry merch, like Rabbit Valley, Fur Planet. Print-on-demand books started coming in, so that's how you get Sofa Wolf Press. And webcomics were taking off like crazy, because now if you were an indie webcomic, you didn't have to rely on newspapers or something to carry you. And there were so many furry online webcomics. There was an award called the Web Cartoons Choice Awards, and for a couple of years they had an anthropomorphic comic category. There were just so many of them. In 2004, there was a painting in one of the convention art shows that went for $10,000. But at this point, a lot of the artists, I mean, now that there were furry cons everywhere, artists were like, you know what, I'm only going to send my nice matted art to just the 3 big conventions. So they were sending them to Anthrocon, to Midwest Fur Fest, and further confusion. So a lot of the smaller cons just quietly started just dropping the art show until at this point we barely see art shows in the fandom anymore. Let's see what else happened. By the time we get to 2009-ish, the online trolling, it's finally beginning to die down. Never completely goes away, but the main trolls, the joke kind of got old. But by 2009, there's now like 30 cons all over the world. Most of them small, only 10 of them had over 500 people. Anthrocon 2009 had 3,700 people. The other big thing in the 2000s, being a geek, being a nerd, finally became okay. The corporations realized, hey, we can market to these people. So you began seeing all the superhero films coming out. Huge feeling of sort of solidarity. And now we're going to be a little bit over time, but that's okay. Now we're getting into 2009 onwards, and it's difficult to talk about furry in the present because we're still kind of in the middle of it. Oddly enough, the trolls kind of helped us to become self-critical again. Like I mentioned how it was taboo to talk about furry fandom within the fandom. So after the trolls finally went away, if you were in furry fandom, it's like, hey, I want to kind of discuss, issues we're having. If you sounded reasonable and logical and mature and didn't sound like a complete asshole, people were suddenly willing to listen to you again. So that was a major change. A lot of younger furries coming to the fandom at this point, post-trolling, were like, because half the fandom would be like, yeah, you'd be proud that you're furry, and other people are like, well, people online can kind of treat you like shit. So new people coming are like, do I come out as a furry? And you're like, no, do not use that terminology. It's just, just figure out if it's safe around you or not. Now at this point, the persona, like full-blown persona things, because the fandom was big, you wanna feel unique, so there's a lot more hybrids, a lot more fantastic coloration. That really kicked in. We started having more art sites, so we had Weasel, Furry Network, other stuff. Briefly, there was corporate interest in furry fandom. IMVU bought Fur Affinity, didn't really know what to do with it, and then sold it back to Dragoneer. We weren't quite too sure what to make about that. And it's still, we're a little bit nervous, it's difficult to run a furry art site now just because there's so many people. And Fur Affinity still wobbling forward. It's really difficult to start a furry art site now. And if any of the big ones goes down, I don't know what's going to happen. I've been saying that for years, and actually they're still going, so I don't know. Now we have a lot more local messages.
Basically did finally go down.
Oh, which one?
VCL.
Yeah.
Actually, it was still running a few months ago.
Oh, I hope it's on archive.org though.
Yeah. There's actually a specific archive for it on another site as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Archive, and yes, there are archives.
Everyone's starting to make hard copies of things.
But yeah, now a lot of our furry message boards are Telegram. We're scattered more across social media. There's still tons of Anthro webcomics. Then we had like the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic wave. And it's funny because it's like, oh my God, make it stop. Anyone who was in the 90s was like, look, this just happens. You just have to wait it out. Actually, it's unusual that there was this very long gap without any waves in the fandom. That was kind of weird. The mainstream media is becoming a lot nicer to us. Vice magazine in particular. Vice, unfortunately, closing down. They got bought out. I hope their stuff is going to be archived. But I mean, people are just getting more relaxed about it. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3. So it's like, how times are changing. There's now a lot more mutual understanding between us and other fandoms that we did not have in the past. Fursuiting is just crazy. We've become, like we had that huge growth in LGBT in the fandom, now we're having a lot of transgender stuff in the fandom. Again, it's the same pattern all over again because we are a safe and positive space. And now, like I said, in the late 90s, the fandom mantra was open, accepting. Now, what we hear is family, community, identity. as the number of furry conventions has grown, they started a group called the Furry Convention Leadership Roundtable. So different furry conventions can sort of discuss issues, how they all run each other. Your character here, that was a new development that came in around 2011. We have enough people showing up that we have to do, so this is your first FurryCon. Dance competitions, relatively new. Sign language interpreters, like during main stage acts at some of the big cons. We've also had our share of drama. There was the chlorine incident at Midwest Fur Fest 2014. Some cons, despite behavior issues, things have gone a little bit out of control occasionally, so we lost Rainforest, Oakwood Con, Rocky Mountain Fur Con. Fursuit parades, some conventions have abandoned them. Midwest Fur Fest switched to organized photo shoots. Anthocon embraced it even harder, and now it's an outdoor event that the whole city can watch on the city streets. Print-on-demand books, so there's so much more furry book publishing happening. Ebooks is now a thing. Crowdfunding, just projects in advance. That has been such a huge boon to furry fandom. Podcasting. There's so much better video production. We're still doing charity fundraising. If you take all the charity fundraising across Furry Fandom 2003, $1.5 million that year alone. We've unfortunately had the surgence of the far right in the fandom. The trolling has never quite gone away. The far right has been circulating this story about kitty litter, in schools. It's bullshit. It's become a lot more difficult to book hotel rooms. Yo.
The kitty litter origin is from in American school, they have litter in case of school shooting.
Yes, they tracked down where's this kitty litter story coming from, and they found a school that actually were worried after the Uvalde shooting. There's so let's have a bucket of kitty litter in case we're trapped in our classroom and some kid really needs to go to the bathroom. Actually, the part of the problem with furry history is that occasionally things happen and it becomes a he said, she said situation, and it's very difficult to know the truth about certain incidents in the past of furry, because there will be people who will exaggerate the hell out of some stories and some people who will deny they even happened. I believe that a kitty litter thing actually happened. I believe it was at Anthocon in one of the side hotels. Some stupid furry who was too lazy to clean up their own mess left a box of kitty litter in the hotel hallway for the maid service to clean up. And the reason why I believe in this is because there is a Mexican-American actress named Celine Luna. I heard her interviewed on a furry podcast, and she mentioned this. And I saw this thing. We were filming, and I saw this thing in the hotel. And they were like, oh my God. And the thing is, she wasn't the only one. The story of this also got to a right-wing shock jock radio host who began circulating that story. And that story is how we started getting this kitty litter story in the right-wing media. So it's a very sort of awkward thing. Another thing that we're getting more recently in the past couple of years, we're scattered on social media sites. The furry has always been very unfocused on the internet, and it is becoming more unfocused in the last 5 years. It's difficult to find and discover new things because everyone is scattered everywhere. Not everyone is using the furry art sites anymore. A lot of people, well, this is my GoFundMe, this is my personal Patreon site. So the discoverability within furry fandom is struggling, and I don't know where that's going.
Bring back web rings.
Yeah, oh God, web rings.
I actually have a web ring on my personal website that I started. It's literally just a few people that I just.
A web ring was if you had a web page, you'd put a little thing in the bottom saying we're part of this web ring on this topic, and you'd click next. Show me the next site. Show me the next site. You sort of follow this track, and then one site would go down, and that would break the chain. And anyway, that was very much
finding people within a similar interest group, and also it helped with search engines back in.
Oh
the
yeah.
day, apparently.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because PageRank used to be based on
Yeah. It used to be based on people linking to each other. And It still is to an extent, but it's way more complex now.
But there's other things going on, like a couple of years ago, I thought, well, is NFTs going to be a thing, a threat to the fandom? At the time, it felt like it. No, it was dead within a year. Now we're in the middle of AI, and it's like, what's going to happen with AI? We've already had some drama.
You mean fancy autocomplete?
But who knows? Who knows? Time will tell. Now we're here. Now we've got like over 60 cons. Over half of those have 1,000 people. The biggest ones we're now at like 13 to 14,000. We're still very small in comparison to other kind of events, like Gen Con, that's for gaming, that's got like 50,000, Dragon Con, 80,000, Anime Expo, 110, San Diego Comic Con, that was about 130. These stats are a little bit old, but now we've got VR. I mean, we've technically Second Life was VR, so we've had VR for a very long time. But now the VR is much higher quality, and thanks to COVID, it's even more popular. So now it's like Furality, like their virtual convention has more people than our physical conventions. And that is absolutely amazing and astounding. And I'd love to try it, except I get simulation sickness in under 15 minutes. So not going to be my thing.
It might get better.
Yeah, the pandemic hit us very hard because we rely so much on our conventions. So in the past couple of years, there's been this sudden, like, oh, the conventions are back. Oh, no, the conventions are back, you know. So huge jump in our numbers. We're also seeing more cohesion in furry fandom of people getting together to talk about gaming, tabletop or computer gaming, just music composers. There's a lot more Black, Indigenous, people of color cohesion. They want better representation, even though they're a small percentage of the fandom. They're beginning to group together to sort of make things more towards them. 3D printing has been like a huge boom. Like I said, crowdfunding's still going on. Furry fandom is getting big enough that in some big cities we're booking local nightclubs for like monthly events. That's like amazing. And we'll just see how the furry fandom evolves from here. I guess we're a little bit over time. Hopefully no one's going to be kicking us out. But I'll say if anyone...
Actually, on your time.
Are we?
Yeah, this is booked for 2 hours.
No, I only asked for an hour and a half, but...
Well,
Well, I'm going to stop talking. No. I'm glad to jab.
anyway, you got another 20 minutes before they kick you out.
So in the rest of it. If you're just another furry history, it's very scattered. Mark Molino and Rod O'Reilly and Changa, there's online, you can find the conference archive. You can find a lot of very old sort of bits of old fandom material there. There's a blog, I don't know how active it is, I haven't checked it for a while, called Fang, Feather, and Fin. Local to Toronto, RK has been doing this series called Culturally Effed, great YouTube series. There was a book published recently called Furtania, The History of Furry Fandom in the United Kingdom. I haven't read it yet. I'm very fascinated about that. And then, of course, there was Ash Price and Eric Wisher's The Fandom documentary, where they actually interview Mark Molino and a number of other people. 2 months ago, I became aware of another panel that apparently has been going on for years. I'm very much kind of off the radar, called 85 Years of Convention History. It's done by Bash the Pinata, aka Inanimorphs. It has a wonderful slideshow. He talks about the evolution of science fiction conventions. Starting with science fiction, it goes all the way through decades and decades. He starts talking about anime conventions and then eventually furry conventions and how we fit in that tradition. You can find it on YouTube as well. I thought he was going to be doing it here, but I guess not. It's just amazing, and that's sort of just the overview of furry history. Now, what I also brought here, if you want to browse through, so this, like I said, this is an issue of Rowbrazzle from January '89, and you can see what the furry fandom looked like back then. Now there was another. This one is called Huzzah. Huzzah was for like artists that actually. I mean, this is for general fans. But if you were a higher quality artist and you'd actually had a little bit of artist cred, you could get into Huzzah. So this is sort of the higher quality one. I ended up with a copy of this. Apparently there was a member of Rowbrazzle living in Winnipeg the entire time. And he never interacted with any of us. We didn't even know he existed. Then he passed away. He had this box full of comics and zines that were donated to a local comics, toys, and collectibles store. And that guy knew about Furry Fandom, and he gave it to Chinona, who was con-chair of Wild Furry FurCon, now con-chair of Furry. And then she called me in, and I was like, can I have these? Otherwise, they're very, so please feel free to browse, gab about anything. I don't know if you have any questions. I may not be able to answer your question, but we've got other people who probably can. So at this point, it's just free form. And I hope you really enjoyed the history presentation, and it's just glad to share it. Oh, and finally, one little plug. I'm editor on a site called Flayrah, FLAYRAH.com. It's very low traffic, but if any of you want to write reviews of anything furry, within the fandom, outside, movies, computer games, books, whatever, we're always looking for more content. I can help clean up the text, add images. Probably not too many people will notice, but maybe if we have more contributors, maybe we'll get more traffic. So if you want to do that, flayrah.com. And okay, enough of that plugging. Let's just jab. I'm so happy you all came. It's been a wonderful audience. That is a very old Albedo t-shirt.
1984.
Nice. That's a good edition, eh? Yeah.
Well, I don't wear it all that often. And yeah, this reads Irma, Velma, EBF, Island.
No way.
Yeah, we're created its own alphabet.
That's fascinating.
Oh, Steve Galacci, the artist, worked as a technical illustrator for the U.S. Air Force.
Oh, wow. They have one hell of expertise, though.
So it's like, yeah, that's the reason why he does a lot of military work and is very good with it.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense why Albedo is stored in a small machine. Very, very technical military work. So that makes sense.
Black and white.
Yeah. No, sorry, 1990.
Oh, that's late then. Okay.
I found like it got uploaded on Archive. So I found it. Yeah, I was just curious.
I've never heard of that.
Okay,
That is
cool.
bizarre.
All right. Thanks.
I'm curious now.
It all exists on Archive if you're always curious. Or not Archive of Around. Archive.org.
Okay.
If you're interested. But, yeah.
Always weird things coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah. As for VR chat, have you done desktop mode? Or is
I
that-
haven't tried yet, but then I also can get simulation sickness watching people play Minecraft. So I do want to try it at
desktop-
some point.
Desktop mode, you don't need a headset for VR chat.
I know it's just you're a little bit more stiff in how you can
I was
interact.
getting that just playing Minecraft sometimes.
Yeah, I'm the same. I tried. I went to a friend's house. They had a Vive. I needed to borrow the avatar, which was this big busted punk zebra woman. But everyone knew it wasn't them, it was me. And I enjoyed the experience, like visually. It's just afterwards, it's like, no, I gotta take this thing off. So.
It seems to be like a sometimes thing for me. Like sometimes I'm fine, sometimes I'll play a bit and start feeling nauseous.
I haven't figured out the triggers, like, because I've watched some first-person video games and been absolutely fine. And then other times it's like, no, this doesn't seem to be working for me.
Just something about the video that's different or something.
The other thing is I don't have a persona, and me picking an avatar of any sort online is a giant intellectual struggle for me. So
Well, pick a different one every day till one sticks.
that's true. I'll change my name. I'll change my look just constantly.
There's plenty of free avatars on the VR chat.
Oh yeah, there's
Desktop mode-
Gumroad. I can buy them as well.
Yeah, desktop mode, you'll be fine, I think.
Oh yeah, no, I've got friends on VR. Do you know Fods? He does like a dance DJ event.
No, no.
Yeah, okay, well,
I've talked to him a few times.
yeah. Well, he's actually from Winnipeg, and then he moved to Ottawa. So. Oh, thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's really informative.
Kind of want to take it home and read it.
Look up the ones that are archived. Bit easier.
Yes, I've never actually gone looking. Here, come around. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I've never found any.
Well, there's 3 parts. You want to take a look at one of the other parts?
I think the other part is way over there now.
Yeah, everybody can have a part.
Yeah.
You got written, you got comics, you got a sort.
Yeah, this is what the early furry fandom just.
Oh yeah.
This was the furry experience in the early days.
Before Photoshop.
It's like for affinity, but on paper.
There was this period in the late 90s, like I don't know, 96-ish, where very, very early Photoshop, and everyone started doing like digital coloring of their art, but the coloring was like everyone was using the same airbrush tool, and it looked really crappy. Like it all looked the same. And the problem is, like on free art sites, like they would show little thumbnails, right? So you'd look through the thumbnails and say, oh, I want to look at that one more close up. So in color, in thumbnail, it looked fine. And then when you blew it up to full size, he's like, oh no, it's using that horrible airbrush. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
it got better. It got better slowly.
Some of the stuff you see now, like, everything's digital.
Oh yeah, and there's also little undercurrents of furry fandom still going. Like I mentioned the furry book, like the online text-based thing, still going.
Still there,
It
you
still
can join.
exists.
I know.
The fun part about Furry Muck is when I signed in today on Furry Muck, usually there's about 4 to 7 people on my watch for list. I've added more than 20 years ago.
I think last time I was there, I fell into a bunch of pillows in a gazebo.
Well, that's what gazebos are for. Thank you for coming.
Good luck if you go check out the den.
Okay, yeah, I have to pick up 2 things from there, so before 4, I should be good.
Very much a go-getter kind of person.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and the puppet show is in VR chat.
Oh
now.
shit, I forgot to mention Puppet. That's still going. There's like, well, they took like a 2-year hiatus, but now there's like over 900 episodes. They're coming up on like 25 years of Puppet production.
Yes.
I actually got to, I forgot to mention, Eurofurence has their Puppet show. I went there once, that actually moved me like emotionally. I was like tearing up at one point. I was like, it was, yeah.
Well, the puppet show is in VR chat now, and we usually have about 30 to 40 in the audience in VR chat, watching the show and interacting with games, which is always fun. Interactive games.
Is it still on video though?
Yes, still on it's on Twitch as well.
Okay.
Hey Terry, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm Bungeeskunk.
I mean, I was one of the people who was on Furry Muck before it actually opened to the public. Because I knew half the people who were creating it in the first place from having been on another mud previously called Islandia.
Excellent. It's not pretty often used as part of academia. So is this your first time you've done this?
No, but it's been a while.
I was around, I done the same thing.
Yeah, because in
I actually have
basically March
several
1990,
issues of Rob
I ended up
They're hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, Chuck Melvin was setting off his at the time. That's like
I was trying to run an albedo role-playing game at a local gaming club.
Like I said, I used to have yours and a whole bunch of other things. I'm selling off the Capcom. I would love to get maybe a Fan Clone Steel, maybe some old Centaur's Gatherums. I have a York reprint where they've actually shrunk the pages, so it's not the original size anymore. And I don't know what other ones I'd get. I've still got like a handful of comics, like I've got some old Xanadu's. I don't want to bring those to cons, but I can photocopy them, put them on a little duotang or something.
You have lunch in?
I once had the luxury of going to this little out-of-the-way bookstore in Marco. And I went through their comic section. I found issue 8 and 9 of Albedo.
Yeah.
And
Dealer's is open again.
Like, this was 6-7 years ago.
Well, the Germans were actually
Those are
Palatines.
prized possessions, and I would love to collect the rest. But
That was the other interesting thing. There's so many things I forget to bring up during the presentation. So like when the comic book explosion happened, before Furry Fandom was made, most of the participants were also creators. Not all of them, but I think the majority were. So when the comic book explosion there was this shift, and people realized that, okay, now we are starting to have a fandom with not just creators, but actual fans, people who aren't producing anything, but are willing to buy our stuff. And that was also a notable shift.
taking up.
It's actually something I'm seeing in a bunch of different communities at the
What's
moment
Hollywood
that
makes sense,
are
hasn't it?
all kind of rooted in that
Well,
same
three
70s,
different
80s
Eastern Canadian colonists
culture
started
shift.
that same year.
Where it started off as a very creator-focused culture, and then slowly went into a more consumer route in
all started the same year.
larger populations.
I think we're still a mixture. I think now it's not so much. I mean, we have consumer culture. I mean, we can say creator culture, but I think you have to broaden the concept of creator to be like, I've created a persona. I've created a version of myself within this fandom, and just by being here, it's a form of adding to it. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
I think
Everyone is creators.
I think Henry Jenkins, back in 1994, scholar of fandom studies, proposed the term participatory culture.
Yes. Oh, that's a really good term.
Yeah. Participatory culture for all kinds of, actually for fandom in general.
Well, that's what fandom is
That's
for.
what it is.
So.
Some of the events in the story.
Yeah, the furry fandom,
they would have
the computer industry really drove it.
No
to
way.
an extent, I think.
Oh yeah.
See who
And
won the game.
I see that showing up in the conventions, like we were talking about the way that was offered in the
You do
news.
not see anything like that nowadays.
These zines, when they started out, this was mimeograph based originally, of course.
Oh god, the smell. Oh god.
So that was how they worked. But then once photocopiers was the first step.
And home publishing.
And then home publishing, which then dot makers, printers, and color printing came along.
I'm curious, is anyone here still using dot matrix? Let's see if someone's. The inkjet printers would have been a thing back. No, this is inkjet that you're getting.
Yeah, once you got to
I worked
stuff
for a
like
company
this,
that
the way
still
that
makes
Here's more a typewritten one.
yeah, the way that the apples worked
So we're
was
looking at manufacturers that make pictures?
Yeah.
Wow, excellent.
an individual would act as for
Ah, I see.
the consolidator. I think the term
Collation.
collation. That was it. Collationist. For
We got cornered
everyone
now.
would send in their 50 copies of their work.
Well, then again, the
Collation.
dealer
You had to-
closed
you
at
had to
4,
create
so.
50 copies of your own work. Send it in, the collationist would put it together, either into a single
Can't wait too long.
thing, or yeah, as our also got thicker, 4 or 5 units stapled together, and then put that into manila envelopes, send them off to the people.
Some of the contribution guidelines were more flexible. Like it would be like not 3 pages every issue. It'd be like every 3 issues, up to 5. At least 5 pages.
Yeah, because people have their own lives. My own
And
publication,
for times
Time
they
Law
face the
Steel,
circumstances they
well, that
face,
was
it
all
sounds like they
desktop
did a really good
publishing.
job
I
today.
printed it off on my laser printer, then I would take it in
They did well
and
by everybody who was involved.
surreptitiously use the photocopiers at work.
The other thing you would
Yeah,
see.
send it out, do it that way.
The other thing, if you were a participant in one of these, there would be a very slow meme. Like someone would draw something, maybe taking a poke at someone else, and then the next issue, someone would respond to that, and then more and more people would respond. It was called zapping, and you would have this sort of. They would turn into like these running gags from issue to issue.
You'd have to read them all to see it.
Yeah, you'd have to be a participant to really be following along with whatever was happening.
That's how communities are built. Is
Oh, yeah.
by making those kinds of insider things.
Yeah, but no, it's